Hey, this is Cam, and I'm joined by three great friends in the Y, best friends in the Y movement, and CEOs of Ys in North Carolina. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Jamie Morgan, Walter Britt, Paul Vest. Jamie, we'll start with you. Introduce yourself and tell what Y you work with.
Sure, Jamie Morgan, and I am currently the CEO for the Rowan Cabarrus YMCA. Been fortunate enough to be the CEO in Rowan County since 2000, so for 20 years, and then we actually merged with the Cannon Memorial YMCA earlier this year. So just very blessed to serve the local community.
Great. Walter.
Walter Britt with the Alamance County Community YMCA. Have been CEO there since February of '98. So 22 years.
And Paul.
Paul Vest, I'm President and CEO for the YMCA of Western North Carolina up in Asheville, and been here since 1996, so about 24 years.
Great. Three long tenured CEOs all in that same location. And that's what we want to talk about today is just the benefits really of being in one place a long time and being that leader there. Jamie, you not only have been the CEO in Rowan, but your entire career with the Y has been there, correct?
That's correct. Yes, I was a branch exec for 8 years prior to becoming CEO.
And what did you do before you came to the Y?
I was a high school math teacher, taught math, coached 3 sports.
Share who would share the names that brought you into the YMCA?
So the guy named Jack Thomas, and Walter, that name may ring a bell to you, not sure, but Jack got his start in the Raleigh YMCA, and he was one of those Wyatt Taylor disciples that came through under Wyatt. And so anyway, he basically, as a teenager, he hired me as a day camp counselor. All through high school and college, I continued to work for him. And then after 5 years in professional education, he kind of convinced me that the Y was where I belong, and definitely was a calling for me. But it's very, very interesting to, even though I never worked in the Raleigh YMCA, to have at least a lot of that background from those early years in Raleigh.
Yeah, that's great. Walter, what about you? Who got you in the YMCA and where?
My first job was at Camp Seagull as a junior counselor in 1986. I took lifeguard training at the YMCA downtown Raleigh and learned about camp. Had to wait 1.5 years before I could apply. And I don't know if many of you know Jim Epps, Captain Jim, they call him in Raleigh. He was the HR person for camp, so he hired all the staff, and I was blessed to get an offer to work with him, and I did that one summer. Went to school, needed a parking place near campus at NC State, and Jim had been promoted to branch director at the Central Y in downtown, where I needed a parking place, and he told me absolutely I could park there anytime I wanted to, but I had to work the front desk every Monday night from 5 to 10. That really kind of got me started in Y work outside of camp.
Yeah, that's great. And, the people listening, that's again Wyatt Taylor, Camp Seagull. And so I wonder, Camp Seagull's kind of changed the Y world in some respect. I wonder how many of those disciples are out there in that Camp Seagull, Wyatt Taylor family tree. Paul is like me. He's a second generation Y director, but talk about your Y career, Paul.
Yeah, I was actually a kind of a second thought. I started out of college as a recreational therapist working with a adolescent drug and alcohol program here in Asheville, actually with a group of teens that was able to work with for about 2 years and got burned out on that and started sniffing around the Y work, and had actually talked to my dad about Y work prior to getting into it, and he was kind of pushing me away from the Y. At the time, the national offices were in New York, and so kind of went on to other things. But after getting burned out on working with kids on the drug and alcohol side, I decided to get on the preventative side and took a job up in Connecticut, left Asheville, went to Connecticut. And Tom Colligan, whose daughter actually works for us here in Western North Carolina, hired me into the Y. He and Sandy Roberts. I spent about 5 years up there. Used my psych background because I managed a 55-room residence, so dealt with all kinds of things I could write about. Left Connecticut after about 5 years, went to Southampton Roads, Virginia, worked for Chuck Harris and Billy George down there, and did that for about 5 years. And then this opportunity here in Asheville opened up, and time it was a small little quiet Y here in Asheville, and had the opportunity to come and haven't looked back since.
Yeah, three great leaders, all have done just three amazing jobs where you're at. And so I throw this out, and I had this conversation with a few peers about that they thought it was hard to stay at a YMCA more than 7 or 8 years. And again, my father in his career, he seemed to move 7 or 8 years. And he had 3 stops in his career, and he stayed the longest in Greenville at the end. But talk about, and out there, whoever wants to go first, what are the benefits of being at a Y 20 plus years?
Cam, I'll start, and I don't know how the other guys feel about this, but I don't think I set out to be here 20 plus years. I think I kind of thought that maybe 10 years and maybe I'll move on, do something else. But kind of as fate would have it, and opportunities and just the impact we have in our local communities, you just develop that love for your own community. But I do think that the benefits, one of the benefits is that once you're in a community for that long of time, there's a certain amount of trust, I think, that you build with the community, and you're able to build really strong boards. But the other thing is that Christian emphasis stamp that we can kind of place on our YMCA. And I know for me personally, that's extremely important with our YMCA. And I think that for me, above anything else, is probably why I've stayed here, is I'm at a YMCA that believes first and foremost that the mission of our YMCA and the ability to take those Christian principles and put them into practice is paramount. Nothing else supersedes that. And so to me, that's the big benefit of staying here for a length of time and having that. Maybe that kind of goes back to the culture, but for me, above anything else, that's what's most important.
Great. Walter, Paul?
Yeah, for me, it's interesting. When I came here in '96, I followed 2 other CEOs who were both here for about 10 years. And I remember vividly mentioning to the board that my commitment to them would be a 10-year stay. And again, I grew up in the Y. My dad, we moved from Southern California to New Jersey to Washington State. And so we were in that track of moving quite a bit during his career. And so even 10 years at that point in time felt like a long time. And it was really because I wanted to make a commitment to our family and get our boys out of high school. But 10 years came and went. The relationships were deep with volunteers and donors. Had incredible staff that inspired me and helped me be the best that I can be in so many different ways. And I think looking back on it now, if it weren't for the relationship with the volunteers, the board members, probably wouldn't have stayed here. I think it was, I always felt like every day I could get up and felt inspired about going in and doing the work. It was time for me to stay here, but we've had huge growth over the years. Had some, opening Camp Wataya 5 years ago is probably one of the top high points of my career, and so I couldn't be here if I felt comfortable and relaxed in the job. And so I think working with a group of volunteers who shared in the same vision and inspiration to grow the Y and be that community-based organization and serving more people really was the pivotal part of that work.
Good. Walter, other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think relationships have been key for me as well. Relationships I've been able to build in the community over the years. And to touch on what Paul said, for me personally and for my family, to be able, my children were born after I started here and they're 19 years old. So we've been able to spend in one place their whole childhood. And so I appreciate that. That's one of the benefits outside of the wise benefit of the same leader for so long. But for me personally, being in one place for that length of time, raising my children in one place has been a huge personal benefit for me. I'm not the breadwinner in my family. My wife's an attorney, and she's she works at a very high level here locally, and she enjoys the community as much as I do. So we're just blessed to be able to stay someplace where we can still be effective leaders in our organizations.
Yeah, that's correct. Walter, you and I are both from smaller communities. Go a little deeper into the relationships, not just on your Y board, but in the community. How has that helped you just having such a long tenure?
Well, our community is not a very transient community. And what I mean by that is when I was introduced to a lot of the community leaders back, my chief volunteer officer back in '98 took me around and introduced me to all the other community leaders. And many of them are still in the same position or still in a leadership capacity. So there's a much deeper breadth of relationships that I've been able to build with from community leaders as well as government leaders and so forth. So, I mean, those have been invaluable, and to have to replicate those and build those every 6 or 7 years, I think would be difficult in some communities, and particularly a community like ours that a lot of the same people are still the main leaders in the community, and outsiders. It's difficult for an outsider sometimes.
Yeah, that's great. How do you guys, and one, just kind of hearing you talk, I don't think any of us set out to be here this long. And so I go to that axiom, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. So, God's kind of said, no, I know what's best for you, or here's a better plan for you, so we probably didn't set out to do this, but how do you guys, you all talked about being challenged and having a vision. How do y'all stay fresh or refresh yourselves being in one place such a long time?
Well, so the cool thing about all four of us, if you look at us, we all kind of came into our current role at about the same time. So we've been able to really, over a couple of decades, develop great friendships and see how our Ys have grown. But the other thing is, if you look at where our YMCAs were 20 years ago and where we are now, I mean, it's amazing at the growth and the opportunities. But you all know that the value of just education and colleagues and friendships and those kind of things. And then the other thing is continue to surround ourselves with great staff that are energetic and continue to inspire us. I mean, to me, that's part of it for me and how I stay fresh and energized. You got new projects out there all the time. Our needs are changing in our community. So what we do, even though we're at the same Y, the needs are changing. What we do now is probably way different than what we did, 10 years ago. So to me, that keeps me on my toes and keeps me fresh. And then I think the influx of new board members and things like that as well. So I don't have any problem getting bored or talking about being comfortable. I haven't been comfortable in a while. So anyway.
Yeah. Others.
Yeah, I would agree. For me, it's Cam, you and I share a relationship and a good friend that constantly challenges me from almost a leadership coaching standpoint in Greg Mayo, and but challenging me to read about leadership and to read about the different side of the fence and how do you think differently. So when I look over my last 24 years, it's really been fueled by people who have challenged me to think differently at times, and really keeping and I say this in a prayer all the time, keeping my heart and my eyes and ears and mind open to opportunities. And I think that's been the thing that really has kept me excited and energized about being the CEO of our organization, is knowing that we've got volunteers now who almost expect that of us. And that's a big step to take as an organization, when you've got volunteers who are expecting you and your staff to be that progressive YMCA and look at opportunities that 25 years ago we wouldn't have even thought about looking at. So,
well, I agree. The friendships that I've been able to build over the last 20 years, the colleagues have been just times like this together energizes me, and I learned so much. And I tell you, it was one thing I started about 3 years ago. It's an organization called C12. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of C12. And it's basically a small group of business leaders who are learning from one another, holding one another accountable, in creating a greater business for a greater purpose. And so it's a Christian-based ministry where I sit together with other for-profit leaders. And so I've been able to get I've been able to learn some from those leaders and how to manage margin and mission a little bit differently. And so just getting involved in different groups and having different opportunities to learn has kept me motivated and kept me focused.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Jamie, you made a great point. We all started at the same time. I flashed back that I remember when Paul got his job, I went, I hope he sucks because I want the Asheville job someday. And
I remember you telling me that.
And he's done such a great job. I was like, I hope this guy comes about 3 or 4 years and then gets out of there. I'm going to go up to Asheville.
Well, that's when you were still in the A&P.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. But it's just, to me, and I know you've gotten it, even if we moved around, but the fraternity, especially the North Carolina Ys, of just how close we all are. But us four, and there's a handful of other ones that have been around as long that kind of came through our careers together. That's the best part of the job. And for me, I try to convince my younger staff, if you're going to have this someday, if you just stick with it, you'll get this someday. Which will be the best part of your job. So, but the other thing I'm looking at is Walter and I are different, but Jamie, you and Paul are grandparents. And so maybe share a little bit about how that's affected you or changed you in some way.
Well, I'm sure Paul probably feels a lot of the same way, but everybody who tells you how great it is, it's that times 100. There's nothing like it. As great as being a parent is, there's nothing like being a grandparent. It's incredible, and it does change your perspective for me anyway. And maybe that's part of us just getting older as well. But what's important today, completely different perspective than what was important 20 or 25 years ago. Also, I kind of reflect back. You talked about who hired us in the Y, and I mentioned Jack Thomas, who hired me as a teenager. But there was another guy named Charles Johnson who gave me my first professional YMCA job. And those two guys were kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum. Jack was a disciplinarian, strict, hard by the book. And Charles was, pray about it, just let everything roll off your shoulders. And so hopefully I'm somewhere in the middle of those two. But when I think back how important, those people were in my life, I hope that maybe we've got younger staff when all of us look back on this in a few years. Hopefully there's some younger staff that we've been able to influence and kind of lead along the way. But whenever that grandparent time comes, trust me, you'll love it as much as we do.
Paul?
Yeah, and I just, it's interesting. We've all raised our kids in the Y, and I don't know that we talk enough about the incredible gift that is for our kids to see their parents involved in an organization like the Y that just really is servant-led kind of mentality. And so raising two boys, who now both, as of 2 months ago, both of them have now provided us with grandchildren. My wife, Vicki, and I, we've got two girls with my son, Brian, who works for the Greenville Y now. So he's third generation Y professional, and little boy, Jackson, who was born 2 months ago for our youngest son. But and Jamie's right. I mean, there's just nothing like it, especially when you have now two granddaughters after having two boys. But our oldest granddaughter, Seda, was, knock on wood, will be attending Camp Wataya this summer. And Brian and I have been having this challenge. Does she go to my camp, Pop-Up's camp, or does she go to Daddy's camp? And because I paid for it this year, I was going to win on that one. But, hopefully she'll be that fourth generation Y kid that gets raised through, Y camping. So we're excited about that.
Walter, tell about your girls who are Baylor students.
I'll tell you, I have seen how Y camp experience can change a person's life. And my girls have grown up in the Y, from hiding under my desk when they were toddlers to after school, the summer camp at our Y, and then 10 summers at Camp Seafair. And for them, their junior year in high school, to say, Dad, we want to go to school in Texas, it kind of blew me away. We kind of expect them to stay close to home, but camp really prepared them in lots of different ways, from having the self-confidence to be away from home, to have learned how to live communally with other people. And so they've had just wonderful freshman year in school in Texas at Baylor. Unfortunately, this past semester was kind of interrupted with what we have going on now, but I've seen the Y has just been a tremendous aid to my wife and I in raising our children. And so I'm just so truly proud of them, where they are and what they may become. And I think the Y's had a huge influence on them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I appreciate y'all's friendship, and for everybody listening, we, along with, probably a dozen other CEOs, get together at least once a year and spend 2 or 3 days just telling lies and helping each other and just having a good time. And to me, that's the best part of my job is when we can all get together and laugh and reminisce and also challenge each other of some of the innovative things that you guys are doing. Y'all always inspire me. But I appreciate your friendship, also your passion for the mission of the YMCA, and we'll just continue to pray for you and your communities and your YMCA. So thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you, Cam.
Take care,
Thanks,
guys.
Cam. Paul, Jamie, we'll see you guys.
See you guys.
Take care.